No forced entry, no witnesses, just blood and silence. It was a warm summer night in Villisca, Iowa, June 9th, 1912. Just another quiet Sunday in a peaceful little town where people left their doors unlocked and knew their neighbors by name. The Moore family had spent the evening at their church hosting a Children's Day service. It was a big event. Sarah Moore had helped organize it, and all 4 of her children had taken part. Afterward, 2 young girls, Lena and Ina Stillinger, were invited to stay the night. They were friends of the Moore children, and no one thought twice about it. That's just the kind of town Villisca was. Back at the Moore home, the kids were tired from the day's excitement. 8 people settled into bed that night. Josiah and Sarah Moore, their children Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, and the Stillinger sisters. They had no way of knowing that they were being watched. The next morning, everything felt off. A neighbor noticed the house was unusually quiet. The curtains were drawn. No one was out tending the chickens. The front door was locked. After several knocks went unanswered, she called Josiah's brother. When he arrived, he let himself in through the back. What he found inside would shake the town to its core. In the downstairs bedroom, 2 figures lay under a blood-soaked sheet. Upstairs, it was even worse. The rest of the family had been killed, murdered in their sleep. No one had survived. The authorities were called, but by the time they arrived, curious townsfolk had already flooded into the home, contaminating the scene. But even with the chaos, some details were undeniable. The killer had used Josiah's own axe. Every victim had been struck in the head again and again, some so violently their skulls were barely intact. Josiah himself had been hit so hard his eye was missing. His wife, Sarah, was found beside him. The children were discovered in their beds, tucked in as if they were still sleeping. The Stillinger girls were in the guest room downstairs. It looked like one of them, Lena, had woken up. She had a defensive wound on her arm, and her body was slightly out of place, almost like she'd tried to escape. But it was the strange details that chilled investigators the most. All the mirrors in the house had been covered with clothing or sheets. Every window was blocked from the inside. A kerosene lamp had been dismantled and placed at the foot of each bed, its chimney laid carefully on the floor. A slab of bacon was found wrapped in a dish towel and placed next to the axe, which had been wiped off and left leaning against a wall. There was also a plate of uneaten food on the table, as if the killer had taken the time to make themselves something to eat after the murders. Authorities believe the murders happened between midnight and 2 a.m. Every clock in the house had been stopped, likely by the vibrations of the axe striking again and again. The doors were all locked from the inside. There was no sign of forced entry. So how did the killer get in? That's when someone noticed the attic. Investigators found evidence that someone had been up there recently. Footprints in the dust, a spot where the floorboards were cleared as if someone had been lying down watching through the slats above the children's room. The theory was horrifying. The killer hadn't broken in that night. He had been inside the house all along, hiding in the attic, waiting for everyone to fall asleep. Whoever did this had taken their time. They hadn't just killed the family, they had moved through the house methodically, quietly, deliberately. News of the murders spread fast. Reporters descended on Villisca. People from nearby towns came just to look at the house. It was chaos. Theories started flying. Some said it had to be personal. Josiah Moore had once worked for a man named Frank Jones, a local businessman and state senator. The two had a falling out, and Josiah left to start his own business. There were rumors that Jones resented him for it, and that he may have hired someone to take revenge. Others thought it was the work of a traveling serial killer. Around the same time, other families had been murdered in similar ways across the Midwest. Axes, entire households killed in their sleep, windows covered, clocks stopped, always near railroad lines, always random, but still, there was something about the Villisca case that felt different, more personal, more unsettling. Then there was the Reverend George Kelly. He was a traveling preacher who had attended the Children's Day event the Moores hosted that very night. Witnesses said he was strange, nervous. He left town early the next morning on a train. In the days that followed, he wrote disturbing letters to authorities and to people connected to the case, details he shouldn't have known. A few years later, Kelly even confessed to the murders. But his story changed with every telling, and during trial, he recanted. The jury couldn't reach a verdict. He was tried again and acquitted. To this day, no one knows for sure who did it. No one was ever convicted. The case remains open, unsolved for over a century. But the most disturbing part? It wasn't just the murders. It was the idea that someone could be living inside your house without you knowing, watching, waiting. That night, the Moore family welcomed two young girls into their home with warmth and kindness. They tucked their kids into bed, turned out the lights, and locked the door behind them. But the killer was already inside, and when the house went dark, the nightmare began. Some say the Moore house still holds on to that night, that the echoes never really left, and if you visit Villisca today, you'll find the house still standing, silent, still waiting.